Hello, and welcome again to the Let's Do a Crime podcast. I'm Ryan, he, him,
And I'm Mouse, they, them.
and today we're going to be talking about that time that a Mr. Big Sting was used against a cop.
Oh shit!
So, I'm going to give some early trigger warnings. No one gets physically hurt in this, but there's a trigger warning for gaslighting and, to a lesser extent, but still there, stalking.
Okay.
So, in January 2021, so this is recent, former York Regional Police Constable Richard Sr. appears in court in charges of theft under $5,000, forging documents, unauthorized computer use, breach of trust, possess firearm obtained by theft, possess weapon for deadly purpose, attempt robbery, and trafficking of controlled substances.
Okay.
So just to break down those charges there, theft under 5,000 is pretty simple. That's what most theft charges are in Canada. Forging documents.
That's what the charge against that one guy who stole my tablet would have been if the police had done anything.
Yeah. So forging documents is kind of a specific charge because it's not like he made fake documents. It's that forging he signed documents he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Unauthorized computer use. That's a catch-all term for any data breaches in law enforcement. Breach of trust.
That's very funny. Just you used a computer against our permission.
Oh, I mean, I'll go a little bit more into this, but
Yeah. But just from initial hearing, that's very funny.
Yeah, breach of trust. Like again, a catch-all for you were entrusted with something in a public office and you have gone against whatever your oath was. Possess firearm obtained by theft. Possess weapon for dangerous purpose, which this is both the same weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Attempted robbery, and which is pretty obvious. Robbery, I've seen some confusion about what robbery, difference between robbery, theft, assault is. Robbery is when you're stealing something with a threat of force. So if I just come in and grab something from you and run away, that's just theft. If I come in, threaten you with violence, hand over something, and then I take it and run away, that's robbery. So there's a difference. And then trafficking controlled substance. So controlled substance is any, usually means drugs, but it could also mean things like prescriptions that you don't lawfully have access to. So there are different levels of trafficking controlled substances, but those are the charges.
Okay.
His defense would attempt to argue entrapment, as the majority of the charges would come from an intense undercover operation, corruption investigation. This is the one time that I can find that a Mr. Big Sting was used on a cop. I'll shout out that where I got this story from is there's a YouTube channel called Runkle of the Bailey. He's an Alberta lawyer. His channel is really good, but he does cover mostly firearm stuff because that's his specialty in law. So if you're not into firearms, don't look up his channel, but he does cover a lot of cases like this and really interesting landmark Canadian cases. He also covers those. So even if you're not into firearms, his channel's great.
And also if you're into Canadian stuff at all, or if you don't know too much about Canadian crimes, maybe that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, he explains some of your rights in court and stuff like that most people wouldn't realize not having been through the system before.
Yeah, I'm a law dumbass, so that would be useful for me.
So speaking of law dumbasses, we've talked about Mr. Big Stings before, right? So
yes.
Mr. Big Sting, just to summarize, if you didn't listen to a previous episode, is when the police are trying to get evidence on a crime from someone. So they do a sting where they make a fake criminal organization, convince their target that they're part of this, that they're joining this criminal organization, and then have them work their way up until they talk to the boss, Mr. Big, who then will demand information from them in order for them to be inside this criminal syndicate. Its use is really questionable. There's been a couple good uses of it, but in general, it's very kind of gaslighty and entrapment-y.
Highly controversial.
Yeah, it's highly controversial. So the inciting incident to this whole thing is an accusation of misuse of police databases, which is where the unauthorized use of computer comes from.
Right.
So he specifically is accessing CPIC, which is the Canadian Police Information Center. It's the federal database we all get access to. That's where you check for warrants. That's where you check if someone's got a criminal history, stolen vehicles. In fact, pro tip for everyone out there buying a car, in Canada, you can go onto the CPIC website and punch in a VIN number of a car, and it'll tell you if it's stolen. So if you're buying a used car, look that up, punch in the VIN number, and it'll tell you if there's any theft reports on that vehicle.
That's
And
really awesome. I didn't know that that was something that we could do.
yeah, a lot of people don't know, and everyone should do that if you're buying a used car.
Yeah.
But generally, access to this is heavily restricted. There's other law enforcement databases too, so obviously York Regional Police has their own database. Here in Alberta, we have something called Moves Roads, which is what is the registry is based on. It tells you like what license plate belongs to what car and who owns it and stuff like that. There's a
Sounds so poetic for some reason.
yeah.
Moves roads.
Yeah, they're both acronyms. I don't know what they're for. Like I've read them obviously, but like everyone calls it Moves or Roads.
Mhm.
But there's a million different databases that we can potentially get access to, and like some of them are like big heavy hitters like CPIC. If you abuse CPIC, you're fucked. You're going to jail. If then there's lower level ones like municipal databases. If I were to look up a municipal something and I wasn't supposed to, like I might lose access to the database, but I probably wouldn't go to jail for that. But generally speaking, police databases are heavily restricted and their use is monitored, and the fastest way to get fired is to abuse one of these databases. But
Makes sense.
you can get away with it for a while though, because like obviously we're using these databases daily. Like one officer can access one database dozens of times in a day legitimately. Combine that with every officer in the country. So what they'll usually do is they'll do random checks and see if the information you pulled up is related to a file you're working on, and if it's not, then they could contact you and ask you why were you accessing this, because sometimes it's legit. Like if you just run a plate, at a traffic stop and then just have to let the guy go, yeah, it could still be legit, right? But usually when someone is investigated for misuse of database, there's either a complaint or they've noticed a pattern of behavior. So you can get away with this for quite a while, unfortunately.
That makes sense. When it's like a big system,
yeah,
slip between the cracks. It's just human error. It's an inevitability.
Yeah, well, and plus it's just so hard to investigate all these. I think they could do a better job of it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And in some cases, there's flags too. Like, say, if I were to go look up Justin Trudeau in CPIC, I guarantee an RCMP special investigator will be knocking at my door tomorrow, because there's no reason why I should be doing that.
Yeah, they'd be like, excuse me, why are you looking up not the Prime Minister? No, yeah,
Yeah, yes.
I almost mixed up Prime Minister and Premier!
Oh, wow, bad Canadian.
Listen,
But they'll flag things too. Like, say, if someone say if I had an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, and they accused me of stalking, then they would flag that my agency would flag their name in the databases, and if I look them up, that would be an automatic investigation. So there are times when they do flag things, but it's all very complicated. So in October of 2016, Constable Senior ran his friend and her ex-boyfriend in police databases at her request, quote unquote, for fun. He later told his friend about her ex-boyfriend's traffic tickets, which is obviously not the end of the world, but it's still a huge privacy violation.
Yeah.
So Senior was also in an affair with another woman who he also ran his police database. This is a bigger flag. He's running someone he's in a relationship with without their knowledge. This is where you get kind of the stalkery behavior.
Yeah, that's fucking creepy, dude. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, and not terribly uncommon. Most people I hear getting fired for this were doing something similar. Another friend of Senior's asked him to check up on a man that she was dating. Senior's phone was later found with screenshots of the man's CPIC information as well as his address and phone number. The warrant also revealed screenshots of information from several other people and vehicles, as well as photos apparently of a marijuana grow op associated with an Enviro truck wash business. Keep in mind, this is before marijuana was legal, so this would have been an illegal op, and the fact that he had all these photos and, as far as I can tell, wasn't involved in an investigation of this at all is really questionable. So the dates for these were spread up through 2016, 2017, and 2018. At some point, York Regional Police caught wind that he was running plates without a reason and began to investigate him. So, if they find one anomaly, they'll usually ask you about it, and then you can go through your notes and stuff and see why you did that. But since they found a pattern of behavior here, they're not telling him at all that they even know about this. They're just going straight to an investigation, which is reasonable.
Yeah, it makes sense. Don't want to arouse suspicion.
You don't want to stop doing it if you haven't proven it yet.
Exactly, yeah.
In June 2018, Senior befriended another officer and they began to partner together. his partner, known only as UC1 in court documents, which, by the way, all this information is from the court case, because in Canada, when they document court cases, it's in a lot of detail. So his partner...
does UC stand for undercover?
Undercover 1, yep.
Yes.
So his partner, known as UC1 in court documents, is an experienced undercover officer who was assigned to befriend Senior and infiltrate his life. UC1 understood that this was a corruption investigation, and his original instructions were not to suggest or create any criminal activity. So obviously, like, you don't want to make him do something, you want to catch him doing something.
Yeah.
But he was fed specific tasks by his handler. UC1 was to play the role of a disgraced patrol officer who just returned from a suspension. So right away, they're setting UC up to be kind of sketchy, presumably so that, like, if Senior is also sketchy, he'll trust him a little bit more.
Yeah, so that he can be like, oh yes, you and I are of a like mind.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because that's how I imagine corrupt cops talk to each other.
Oh, if you want to read the original court document, they put, like, actual recorded conversations in there, and of course, the flow of conversation doesn't work well in text form, so it is kind of hard to read. But they're like, yeah, brother, they're totally those guys. It's hilarious.
Yeah, brother, my dude, my homie.
Initially, it seems like they did normal police work, largely traffic enforcement, but they also became fast friends and regular partners on shift. And I can attest that when you're partnered with someone, you become friends with them pretty quickly, or you hate them pretty quickly. There's kind of no in between, because you're spending all day, every day with them in, like, some pretty intense moments. So,
which makes sense.
Yeah, everyone I've been partnered with, I either became friends with pretty quickly, or I absolutely hated.
Yeah.
So, in July, UC1 was directed to secure their shared patrol vehicle to be bugged. So at this point, they were, like, actual full-time partners. They were sharing a patrol vehicle. He was able to do so and brought it in to be wired up for audio and video via hidden cameras and mics. So this wouldn't have been hard for him to do because, like, all he has to do is say, oh, needs an oil change, I'll take it in. And that's because, legit, sometimes we have to go out of service for a few hours to maintain the vehicle. A few days later, UC1 was then instructed to do the same thing to Senior's personal truck. So he leveraged their new friendship and borrowed Senior's pickup truck, quote-unquote, to move. So he said, hey, man, I don't have a pickup truck. I'm moving. Can I borrow your truck for a couple days? And Senior loaned it to him. He was able to take it to a text, wired up in the same way, and then returned it.
See, maybe it's because, like, I'm not a car person, but, like, anything more expensive than, like, $50, I'm like, I'm coming with this item. Like, you're not just borrowing it.
I mean, like, it does seem a little bit weird that Senior didn't come help him move or whatever. But
yeah,
if he was clever, he might have just arranged it, been like, oh, I'm gonna do it because Constable Senior did have kids. So if UC1 was clever, this is speculation. This isn't in the court documents. If I was him, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna pick a day that I know he can't help me. But I'd be like, hey, I'll loan you my car, you loan me your truck. I'll get this done. We'll swap back. And, you know, I will honestly say that most guys at work probably would go with that. I mean,
yeah, it makes sense. I'm also just thinking or looking at it from, like, my personal perspective.
Yeah, that's true. Well, also, like, when you're partnering with someone, you can see how they drive, so you know pretty quickly if you're ever gonna loan this person your car.
Yeah, and for all, like, the listeners out there, I don't have a license. I can't drive, therefore it doesn't matter.
One thing I forgot to add in my normal intro is that I have been in emergency services and law enforcement for over 10 years, but I am not a police officer. I should clarify that since I keep talking about being a cop.
And I'm just a dumbass.
You're an artist.
I'm an art dumbass.
It is a skill I cannot do. Yeah, so at this point, it seems like no corrupt behavior had been detected, but UC1 was able to establish a great deal of rapport, so, like, building friendship pretty quick, but nothing sketchy has happened yet. Which I wouldn't expect to, like, even if you're, like, dumbass criminal, you're probably gonna be smart enough not to, like, show your real face to a new person within, like, the first month.
Be extremely suspicious if, like, within 1 month, you're like, yeah, I'll commit, like, a bank heist with you, person I just met.
We'll get to that. So,
oh my god, do they do that?
So, at this point, a second undercover officer enters the picture, UC2, aka Henry Wong. I'm going to refer to him as Wong for the rest of this because they actually give him a name in this. But
okay.
So also an undercover officer, also in on this whole investigation. He was to pose as an informant. So this is when, like, you you catch a criminal or some other insider into a criminal organization, and they start feeding you information. He arranged to be pulled over by committing a blatant traffic violation right in front of Senior. When stopped, he was to pretend to be a mid-level Asian gang member who was about to lose his driving license, and offer information to get out of the charges. They put his fake license in the system with just barely not enough points to lose it. So, like, if he would have gotten any ticket from Senior, he would have lost his license to make this more credible. UC1 was aware of Wong and encouraged Senior to accept the deal and establish an informative relationship, with UC1 providing guidance. During the stop, UC1 encouraged Senior to get his phone encrypted, citing his previous issues. So UC1 is pushing the sketchy angle a little bit. He's like, yeah, I didn't encrypt my phone, and that's what got me jammed up last time. So, you should probably get your phone encrypted. Mine's encrypted now. You're like,
this doesn't count. See, now that we've introduced a second undercover agent and they're doing this traffic stop, I'm wondering if this is pushing the illegal activity just a little bit.
Well, not yet, because the fact that they haven't, so far, none of this has been outside of the normal course of activities for a police officer pulling over someone. So, at this point, it's still above board, in my opinion. Everyone's acting the way they should be. So, so UC1 starts pushing the encryption issues, and then they establish this informant relationship with Wong, and Wong provided intel on a storage locker containing drugs, cash, and guns. UC1 reported this to their staff sergeant and indicated that Senior would be the lead officer in this investigation. Later in the month, this is still July, so this is only 2 months after they've met, UC1 convinced Senior to encrypt his phone. Senior gave UC1 the phone to encrypt. UC1 handed it to the tech department to be bugged, which is why he was pushing this angle. Yeah,
of course.
Early on in this, Senior expressed nervousness about handling an informant and indicated to UC1 he had absolutely no training or experience with this. So he started leaning on UC1 for guidance throughout. And this is something handling an informant is not standard police training. It's not standard law enforcement training. There's very few patrol officers who would ever deal with an informant. I wouldn't have any idea how to deal with an informant. I wouldn't know what the rules are. It's not something that I would ever come across. I'll spare some of the details, but here's the Cliff's Notes from what I could gather from what I did some research. Senior could be the contact officer, but he wasn't able to authorize things like payments, and he shouldn't be working alone. So when you have an informant, you can you can't hire someone to be an informant, but you can pay them for information, so kind of like a reward for getting information. So and these are always authorized after the fact. So he couldn't authorize anything like that. 2 officers are supposed to be present at any informant interaction. So him and someone else, presumably UC1, should always be together whenever they have to interact with their informant to make sure that stuff isn't happening that shouldn't be happening. Officers handling informants don't typically act on tips themselves. They pass it on to their appropriate supervisors. So unlike the movies, if you have an informant, you're not the one who's going to go do the bust. You're just passing information on, and you're staying as arm's length away from the actual investigation as possible. You're just collecting information.
I mean, it makes sense. You wouldn't want your face to be associated with this informant, and then also with the sting operation or anything like that.
Well, also it helps remove steps to corruption, because if you collect information, hand it off to a detective who's not related to the informant, who investigates it, they verify it's real, hand it off to Tactical, who goes and does the bust, then you're several steps removed from whatever the intel actually is. So if someone starts feeding you bullshit, if you're in cahoots with them, whatever the case may be, it makes it much harder to get away with that. But later on, still in July somehow, UC1 was given a new objective to investigate the possibility that Senior was selling steroids. At this point, UC1 and Senior attended gym together and frequently ate breakfast together. So now they're spending a lot of their off time together too. UC1 asked Senior about steroids. Yeah. So UC1 asked Senior about steroids. Senior discouraged him and instead giving him good nutrition advice instead. So I'm not sure why they came to this conclusion that Senior was selling steroids. As far as you can tell, he had never been suspected of this up to this point. And when asked about it, he's like, no, don't do steroids. Which I will say that steroid use in law enforcement is like actually kind of a big problem. It's like a big open secret in a lot of agencies.
Right.
And I can attest that I have been asked about steroids before. I don't know why anyone would ask me about steroids. I'm not like a gym monkey kind of person.
No.
But
You and I are like hiking buds.
But I've been in this situation before where someone says like, "Hey, like I don't feel like I'm strong enough. I don't feel like I'm fast enough. Like, should I do steroids?" And then I'm just like, "No, dude. Like, don't do steroids. Just work out harder." Like, so this, I don't think that Senior would think this is suspicious at all, because this is kind of actually a problem in law enforcement.
Yeah, but that's still like, that's really funny to me that he was like, "No, just eat healthy."
Yeah, which is exactly how I would react too.
Yeah.
As of August 14th, UC1 testified he hadn't seen any evidence of crime from Senior yet. The informant's situation seemed to be going as normal, and any suggestions of steroid use continued to be discouraged by Senior. So at this point, like, Senior's just kind of acting like a normal cop. He's not doing anything sketchy with the informant. He's rebuffing any attempts to get steroids. So, like, right here, it's kind of like, this is maybe when the investigator should have maybe pulled back a little bit on, like, specifically the steroid thing.
How long has this investigation been going at this point?
So it started in June. It's now August. So we're only 3 months in.
Oh yeah, that's real. That's like no time at all, though. They like just started basically.
Yeah, but they're pushing here. They're really pushing hard, which I think this. Yeah. And I can get why you'd want to push hard if you want to get an investigation done and over with, but given that like UC1 was a cop, and even though he's undercover up right now, he's doing normal police work. It seems to me not a problem to leave him there for a while, because it's not like you have an officer that's not doing something. Just leave him there for a while.
An investigation. He's doing his job.
Yeah. So UC1 was also given instructions to start acting more suspicious and to look potentially corrupt without directly saying or doing anything implicating. So just act sketchy. End phone calls early, like step away when it's kind of inappropriate to, like that kind of thing.
Okay.
Around this time, Senior confides that he was having an affair and that the affair was going poorly. So I mentioned earlier he was having an affair with someone.
I know, but I was shocked then and I'm shocked now.
Yeah, so apparently his mistress is threatening to ruin his career.
That's why you don't have an affair, dumbass.
Yeah, and his wife found out. Also, that his mistress's family was involved in drug trafficking, and that he wanted to fuck over this mistress for trying to fuck over him.
Oh my god, this came out of nowhere!
Yeah. So, UC1 offered to help him with filing intelligence reports regarding this. UC1 really pushed Senior to file intelligence reports on his mistress. UC1 also asked if she had any dirt on Senior, but other than the affair itself, Senior didn't admit to anything. UC1 also really pushed the steroid thing now, directly asking for them. Under UC1's guidance, Senior did file an anonymous intelligence report regarding the mistress. However, and this is one thing that he probably wasn't fully aware of, and I wasn't fully aware of, because this is, again, I don't deal with intelligence reports. Mm-hmm. As a police officer, he can't be an anonymous informant in this capacity.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and for this kind of information, it can't be done anonymously because it's too big. Like, there's no hard evidence, so you need a witness. UC1 knew this. Senior almost backs out of it, but UC1 talks him into it. So this is where we can start arguing entrapment, right?
Yeah, this is where, like, I, as just, like, an average person looking at this case, would be like, this doesn't seem appropriate, because he's not supposed to be he's not supposed to be encouraging a crime happening. He's supposed to be like observing. Yeah,
basically. Also in August, Wong started trying to meet with Senior, saying that he had urgent information, and UC1 started giving excuses as to why he wasn't available. Wong also started suggesting meeting at strip clubs. So this is a problem. Like, as I said, there's supposed to be two officers to this, especially given that Senior wasn't a trained informant handler. So he and UC1 said he was, which he probably is, because he's an undercover officer. He's probably had this training. But so he was basically supposed to be Senior's handler to make sure he was doing everything correctly. And now UC1's starting to ghost him and make excuses why he can't meet up. So kind of forcing his hand to go in this alone. And Wong, keep in mind, Wong is also an undercover officer, started suggesting meeting at strip clubs, which first Senior shot down the suggestion. This is a problem because strip clubs are often associated with organized crime and are often
Right.
where a lot of criminal transactions are going down. So for a police officer to be openly going to one is a problem for a bunch of reasons. So
Right.
you're when in my reading, when you meet with an informant, it's supposed to be someplace neutral, usually a restaurant, someplace that like no one would associate with crime or the police at all, and that's
Mhm.
where you do your meetings. But Wong is really pushing the strip club thing. Um, this time he didn't meet with him at a strip club. He convinced him to go meet at a normal bar. Uh,
Yeah.
During this meeting, UC1 left briefly, or sorry, um, Senior refused and insisted on a normal restaurant, rescheduled a meeting until UC1 was available. So he did the right thing here. He refused to meet alone. He kept putting it off until UC1 was actually available and insisted on like a normal restaurant.
Mhm.
During this meeting, UC1 left briefly and returned with unexplained cash. So this is the whole trying to look sketchy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Senior didn't question this, though. After this, Senior started getting more pressure to identify the source of his intelligence report. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff here, but the pressure keeps mounting. Like, his supervisors keep coming down on him. It's like, hey, you need to identify your source for this intelligence report, blah, blah, blah. So he starts bugging UC1, being like, what do I do here? Like, I've gotten it in my head. Like, how do I handle this situation? And UC1 ghosts him and doesn't respond. And apparently he was instructed to do so. He was instructed to ghost him.
Right.
Eventually, this leads to Senior putting a false name on the report. It was a real name of an informant, someone that Senior knew and knew was like kind of sketchy, but wasn't involved in this at all. And so he put his name on the report, thinking that like, oh, if this comes back on me later, I can go just like pay him to say he's submitted or whatever.
Right.
Which is where forging and falsifying documents comes in.
But like, I just want to like go back for a second. This entire investigation has started because he might have been stalking somebody.
Not stalking. It was because he was running plates when he shouldn't have been. So he may have been stalking someone, but most of the plates he were running were at the request of friends and stuff like that, like checking up on their boyfriends and whatnot.
Right.
And then
which like he shouldn't be doing, but this does seem like quite the escalation.
Yeah,
and I'm noticing that a lot of it is at the encouragement of UC1.
Yeah, so I will say that UC1 is being given instructions here. So like he has a handler who's giving instructions.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
I wouldn't absolve him completely of blame, but like he also doesn't necessarily know the whole backstory and is just kind of going with what he's being told.
Yeah, I just wanted to like go over this again just to like make sure that we're still like on the same page and like where we're at on the timeline, just in case people have already kind of forgotten how we got here.
They're definitely turning this into a bigger issue than it has to be.
Well, the fact that they keep asking him for things like steroids or submitting information anonymously when he can't do that, or like honestly, when UC1 heard him say he wanted to fuck over his mistress who is involved in like drugs, he could have dropped the steroids thing entirely.
Yeah, it could have.
That could have been the new angle.
I don't know why they're so on about steroids. I think it like was because someone high up probably wanted to burn him and knew that like in police departments you don't have to throw a stone before you hit someone who can probably get you steroids, and so just kind of assumed that he'd be one of these guys.
Yeah. But okay, it's things like this that are why I think the Mr. Big operation is so controversial, because I can definitely see his activity being encouraged when it shouldn't. It shouldn't be. They should pull back to just observing.
Yeah, I've seen some takes on this case that like for one, this is building up a lot of crime that probably would never have happened if this investigation hadn't happened. But on the other hand, the fact that he's going with it, you don't want this guy being a cop. I say it's like okay, I agree this guy shouldn't be a cop. Like obviously he's too susceptible to this kinds of things. But like you could have just fired him for the misuse of the terminals. You didn't have to turn it into this huge investigation.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, where it's like, okay, you caught him doing this thing. You can see that he's like susceptible to like peer pressure or like mishandling systems and resources that are at his disposal. Like, just let him go.
Yeah. So, where was I? Oh yeah,
I'm so sorry.
so this this ghosting cycle starts continuing,
Mhm.
uh, especially with meeting with Wong. Also, a reward payment was authorized to give Wong for the information. So basically, they said that like, oh yeah, that information was good. We did a bust. We got so and so, and no bust actually happened because this is bullshit information. But
No, of course nothing happened.
because of the degrees of removal, Senior wouldn't know that. If you got word
Yeah.
back that like, oh, the bust was good, this information was good, all it's gonna do is be like, oh, like this guy's helping me build my career. Like I should keep working with this informant, right?
Yeah, it creates that level or degree of trust and reliability.
Yeah. So UC1 starts ghosting with the meetings with Wong. A reward payment is authorized to give Wong for the information. In a conversation, Senior expressed some concern about handling the cash. He didn't think he was authorized. Now, no one, again, he hadn't been trained to handle informants yet. And he was correct. He wasn't authorized to handle the cash, but they were giving it to him anyway to go give to this informant. UC1 kept ghosting him, and eventually it forced Senior to meet with Wong alone. Senior is also led to believe that this payment must be delivered to the informant, which is not true. That if the informant turns it down, the department can't just take it back because it's a reward. It's not like payment.
Yeah.
So if the informant doesn't want it, then the department can just take it back.
But also, why wouldn't you want the reward?
Yeah, well, he was led to believe this wasn't possible. Wong and Senior met in a strip club at Wong's insistence. So finally, like they've gotten him into a strip club for this meeting.
My goodness.
When offered the money, which I think was $1,000, Wong refused, claiming to be insulted. Now, keep in mind, Wong is portraying himself as like a mid to high level person in this organized crime. So, like his whole thing is like it's like I'm giving you this information to help destroy my rivals. Like I make tens of thousands of dollars a minute on these transactions. Why do I want your money? Like don't insult me like this. So he refused to take it. Apparently, Senior tried to give it to him several more times before just leaving it on the table in front of him. And then Wong said later he when he was looking away and looked back, the money was gone, but never actually saw Senior take it.
Mm-hmm.
Wong's handler was also given instructions at this point to provide Senior with access to steroids if asked. Wong noted at this time that Senior had never mentioned steroids.
Why are they pushing the steroids?
Right? So I'm going to skip ahead a bit again because like this cycle continues where he's not able to consistently
slowly escalating things.
Yeah, well, and this is one of the things that like there's a saying in the military that first shot's always the hardest. Like first time you shoot someone is hard and it's easy after that. So the first time they can get him to do something that's like blatantly corrupt, it's easier to do it next time. It's like a moral slippery slope. And you can kind of see that happening here, where he's really resisting up until a point where he steps over the line, and he just starts kind of going with it.
Right.
Yeah. So, this cycle continues where like UC1's not reliably there. He's had to meet Wong alone more often. These payments are being authorized. Wong's not taking it. He doesn't believe he can just give it back, so the money goes missing. So they're really building this whole like conspiracy around him.
Yeah.
And in Runkle to Bailey's video, which he does several hour-long videos on this because he breaks down the case in detail. I'm skipping over a lot. He breaks it down like minute by minute. He also pointed out that that at this point, like all his supervisors are in on it, this informant's in on it, his partner's in on it. Pretty much his entire professional life is fabricated now, and it looks like his career is going really well when really it's an investigation. So that's going to cause you to act differently, right? You're more likely to take a risk to protect your huge boost in career than if you're like, oh, I got a million other things on the go. So he starts getting pressure from another officer, Constable Timur Bulatov, as well about sourcing steroids. And I couldn't find if he was part of this thing. Like he's not, his name's not blanked out, so he might not have been part of this thing, but he was never charged anything. Senior ends up meeting with Wong more often without the UC1. Eventually, he breaks and starts talking about getting steroids from Wong. But he eventually comes in contact with someone outside this investigation, named George Paputzos, who's not one of the UC officers, and this man could get him steroids. So now he's made contact with someone who's an actual steroid dealer because of this pressure. The fake busts continue, and it seems like Constable Senior's career is going extremely well, despite all the weirdness around it. So, like, as far as he's concerned, he's making huge busts based on this intel, and he's got this great partner, and it's all fake, which is like had to have like destroyed this guy when he found out.
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to like be too sympathetic towards him because in the end he did end up committing crimes, but his entire life was a lie for quite a while.
Yeah. This is why I trigger warning for gaslighting. Like, I'm gonna say that based on what I've seen, Constable Senior is not a good cop and probably not a good person, but no one deserves to be like gaslit for their entire life situation. That's just absurd.
Like that's devastating just to think about.
Wong also starts asking Senior to run plates for him. Senior is hesitant and tries to get UC1 to run the plates, but UC1 refuses. Senior eventually does it himself. There, you got him. They
got him on the thing they were investigating him for.
Yeah, so like you can now fire him. You can now charge him with breach of databases and all that kind of crap.
Yep.
On September 6th, Paputzos asks Senior to run his plate to make sure he had no outstanding warrants against him. Senior must have suspected at this point he was under the radar because he asked Constable Timurberlatov to do this for him, which he did. So, like, I don't know if this other constable was part of the investigation. Like, I kind of suspect he was because, like, he wasn't charged with anything and he kind of seems to slot in perfectly to this. But if he wasn't, like, get him out of there.
Yeah, get him out of there too. You got two in one go.
So yeah, now he's running plates, which is, again, the original investigation was into him running plates and accessing police databases when he shouldn't have been. And they've got him red-handed now.
This whole like steroids thing like came out of fucking nowhere. You have him. You have evidence that he did the thing you were investigating him for. That's all you need. Yeah, but they think they've got a big fish. So September 17th, so keep in mind this began in June, we're now in September. UC1 and Senior start seriously talking about obtaining various steroids. They also discuss the latest intel from Long, which is potentially a warehouse with lots of drugs, guns, and money. This is going to be like a humongous, like a movie-level bust, right? Wong has been spinning this up as a huge stockpile for his main rival. UC1 and Senior start talking about busting the warehouse themselves to, quote, make some money. I was reading the chat logs on this, like the recorded conversations, and because of how like conversations aren't like clean and they don't flow very well, it's really hard to tell who's the one who like came up with this. It just seems like one of those like, wouldn't it be funny moments that kind of turned into what if though. Yeah. So I couldn't actually suss out from the conversation if Senior had come up with the idea, which would make it like a legit thing to pursue from an undercover point of view, or if UC1 had suggested it, in which case that would be more along the lines of entrapment. But either way, they start talking about this. So at first they're joking about it, and then it starts turning into an actual plan. They talk a lot about bringing a third person in on this, but this never materializes, so I'm going to skim over it. I have a feeling, it's not in the court records, but I have a feeling that UC1 may have been sabotaging this to keep someone not part of the investigation from getting involved in a potential firefight. Also, is this still the same year?
Yes.
Well, it's only been 4 months.
So this is June to September in 2018.
Yeah, you got him. You're good.
So in September 18th, they start discussing the raid plan seriously.
Oh my god.
They discuss checking to see if the warehouse is already being watched by police. They discuss bringing Wong in on it and having his guys help. Wong's guys could keep all the guns and drugs while the constables pocket the cash. They also discuss doing this themselves with a bullshit warrant. They call their plan version 1.0, so they're versioning this.
Yeah, like a video game.
Yeah. So September 19th, Constable Senior provides UC1 with several Schedule 4 controlled steroids. So in Canada, like our Controlled Substance Act, which is like illegal or restricted drugs, have schedules that list like how severe it is. So Schedule 4 is not that severe. It's still illegal, but you can get them by prescription. Like you can get steroids by prescription if you have legit issues. So he provided UC1 with several, and there was a list in the court documents, but it's a really long list, and no one cares. It's steroids. They also discuss in more detail the plan for the raid, including clothing they would wear to hide their identity if on camera, washing everything of fingerprints. Like, they were talking about, like, washing the individual shell casings from the guns before putting the bullets in, so that if any got left behind, there'd be no fingerprints on them.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense that they're, like, thinking about these things, but also, like, that's so over the top.
Yeah, they're discussing whether or not to go in heavy, which, like, is implied to be, like, heavily armed, prepared for firefight.
Yeah.
The plan at this point seems to be to take everything, keep the cash, sell the drugs, dump the guns. They call this version 2. They later made version 2.2, which was using generic Walmart clothes and a toy drone to scope out the property. Now, like, I gotta think of this in the perspective of UC1, because, like, for Constable Senior, this sounds like they're planning a raid. UC1 knows this isn't gonna happen, and knows this guy's probably gonna go to jail, and he's gonna be fine no matter what happens here. So, like, did he feel bad about this, or was this like a game to him? Because, like, this seems
it
like
almost sounds like he's fucking with him.
Yeah, it starts really feeling like he's having fun with this.
Yeah. Because like there's need to go into this level of like almost like silly.
And also, they've got him again. Like, he's run the plates. He's handed over illegal steroids. Like, they could arrest him at any time now. They have
like,
enough.
Now they've got him for the thing that they were really pushing for him to have, which was the steroids.
But
like,
again, they've
got him for 2.
They've turned this goldfish into a big fish. So on September 21, they get together off duty. They go shopping together and pick out most of the items they need for their plan. They bought black hoodies, cargo pants, silly string to cover the cameras with, which I thought this was very funny because, having worked in lots of facilities with lots of camera coverage, it is surprisingly hard to cover a camera quickly. We've had lots of people vandalize cameras with spray paint, with whatever, to try to hide it. And usually you can still see pretty well out of the camera. Like, it covers parts of it, but it's still usually a usable camera. So, honestly, this guy's never worked as a security guard anywhere.
Oh, probably not.
Yeah, so they get silly string for the cameras, they got flashlights, water, and masks. UC1 later testified that there were lots of joking and laughing, but he believed Constable Senior to be serious. On September 23, Wong contacts Senior to give him the warehouse information. Senior is unable to get a hold of UC1 and meets Wong on his own again. During this interaction, Senior gave Wong a hypothetical scenario of a cowboy crew obtaining drugs from a rival, and if Wong would be interested in purchasing these drugs.
Oh my god.
Wong asked Senior what his role was in this cowboy crew, and Senior stated he was just a middleman. So now he's starting to work both sides of it.
Yeah.
So I'd say this is the point where, like, he himself has walked over the line of what he's been kind of forced to do. Well, not forced, but like coerced to do, and now is acting on his own. So again,
he's back to working on his own, but it's the journey to the destination that is problematic.
Yeah, I don't think there's any good people here. But
no.
In September 24th, UC1 and Senior met to discuss the plan again. Wong had led Senior to believe that there were at least 2 gang members guarding the warehouse and probably at least 3 more inside. Wong also told Senior that there was at least $100,000 in cash alone. Senior said that they would have to go in heavy. UC1 said that he had no personal firearms at home. Senior eventually suggests taking shotguns or rifles from the station, since he knows when they get inventoried and could return them beforehand. He also said he knew people with guns, but that they would probably ask too many questions. And for American listeners out there, firearms are heavily restricted in Canada. You can own them, but there's licensing requirements, there's storage requirements, they're registered to you. And when you're borrowing guns, like this happens all the time. Where someone's like, "Hey, like, I want to go shooting. Can I borrow your rifle or whatever?" You usually go together, because, like, 1, fun range day. 2, you don't want to let those guns out of your sight because those are heavily restricted items. So, like, you want to be there when they're being used. So yeah, even if like a coworker were to say, "Hey, can I borrow some guns?" I'd be like, "Okay, let's go to the range together." And if they were like, "No, I just want to borrow them," I'd be like, "Why?"
Yeah, that should be the first response. Is like, why?
Yeah, it's like, if you're not going to the range, why? No, we're not doing that.
Yeah, because like outside of people who are like collectors and hunters, most people don't have a gun.
Well, in law enforcement circles, I'm going to say that almost every law enforcement officer, most paramedics actually, have gun licenses. It's just a thing that's like shared within that kind of community.
Yeah.
But again, no one's going to loan them out. And if you are, it's going to be like at a range day where you're with the person. You're not just going to like, even if you were just going to loan someone a gun, that's legally problematic. You have to get like permits and stuff like that. It's a whole thing. So I don't think anyone would just do it.
People who are like trained with these firearms being like, no, I'll come with you because I am trained.
And also, as a police constable, he'd have access to a firing range at all times. So, like, even if he was to say something like that, someone would be like, why don't you just go to your range?
Yeah.
So, they also talked about other things from work, like taking a RAM or raid jackets. I'll note here that raid jackets are generic police jackets that they don't have names on them. They just say police and usually, like, what unit you're part of. And they're meant to be thrown on over top of other stuff. So, like, say if you're a plainclothes officer or detective and you have to go to a raid or you have to like run into a shooting situation, you throw one of these generic jackets on top to show that you're a cop, without having to change all your outfit. So presumably they were taking raid jackets so that they could like be believed as police but not have anything identifying on them, because their normal uniforms would have like their numbers and their name and stuff on them.
Yeah.
Over the next few days, they fine-tune their plan and up the version each time. Like in their conversations, they version them up. I think they ended on version 5.
Oh, man.
They start talking in code over texts, calling the plan a date, and whether they would have a third person, a threesome. I need to throw some lines in here because this is glorious, and I don't know what they were thinking if someone actually came across their text messages. Like, one line that they have in there is, we need to know if she's down for the threesome ASAP so we can teach her. Because they were talking about, like, potentially the third person teaching them how to use, like, the guns and stuff.
Yeah.
And they were calling their tools, their weapons and stuff, toys for the threesome. So, like,
my
if
God.
any of their coworkers came across these, people would just be like, they're fucking.
Yeah, they'd be like, these two are freaks. / affectionate.
Which would probably open up their own investigation because they're partners. They shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, that sounds not unethical, but problematic.
I would say a poor choice of code for this particular situation. Like, if anyone suspected them of, like, doing this, then the code's not that hard to break. And if someone didn't suspect them, now it looks like they've got these partners who are fucking. So, either way, either way, you're getting a supervisor involved in this. On October 1, Wong provided information on the location of the alleged warehouse. So now they have all the information they need to actually go do this raid. And I think the delay in getting the location was probably the police renting a warehouse that was going to be empty. So that
so they could, like, set it up.
Yeah. Or at least make sure no one got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Also during this time, Senior has started running plates for several more people and is now transacting steroids on a regular basis. I think we can agree that's far less interesting than what's happening now, though.
Yeah, like, we've already established they had him, they could have arrested him, but now they've moved on to something else, and he seems to be along for the ride.
Yeah. During this time, Senior was also talking to Wong about selling cocaine and had agreed to sell it to Wong for $30,000 a kilo, which is...
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's below...
This is such an escalation, but also...
Yeah, I'll note that $30,000 is noted in the file as being below market value, but, like, obviously he's trying to move it to the one person he knows can take it.
Yeah.
He believed there would be 5 to 10 kilos, so we're talking, like millions of dollars here.
Huh.
On October 9, 2018, Senior, while on shift, removed a shotgun from his patrol vehicle and hid it in a rental van, covering it up with a blanket and some clothes. Shortly afterwards, after he left the area, other officers from York Regional Police opened the rental van, confirmed the shotgun was present, confirmed it was a police department shotgun. They removed the firing pin, which would make it unable to fire, but on a normal inspection would not be obvious. Like, you'd have to take the gun apart to tell. And then they put the shotgun back and put it back where they found it. UC1 at this time was instructed to keep Senior away from the van while the other team disabled the gun. They did a foot patrol at a nearby mall. Constable Senior returned to his patrol vehicle to start doing a report. At this point, UC1 was recalled to the station by his handler, and Constable Senior was then arrested.
Even do the raid?
No, because the explanation that Runkle de Bailey gave, the lawyer who was talking about it, is that if you want to get someone for an attempt to commit, you need to catch them at a stage where they're beyond just planning it. So, like, for attempt to commit a robbery like this, planning it wouldn't be enough to convict them on it, because, like, you can always say, like, oh, like, I'm joking around or whatever. Or you can say, like, well, yeah, I was planning, but I decided not to do it. And then once someone moves into actual preparation for the crime at hand and is, like, imminently ready to do it, that's when you've committed the attempt. So the fact that he had obtained a shotgun illegally and hid it in a vehicle that he rented and had obtained all the other stuff showed that he was past the point of planning and now at the point of about to do it. And so that's probably why they just had to pull the trigger at this point. They're like, okay, we can prove this now. Let's shut it down. So in January of 2022, so this pretty recent, this is only about a year ago, Senior was convicted on several of the counts and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. He was not convicted on all the counts, though. After being found guilty, Senior's defense team did try to argue entrapment. The Supreme Court Justice noted that on the investigation, they had crossed the line of ethics several times, but as a result, the justice had stayed several of the charges. So you only argue entrapment if you're already convicted, because entrapment is a positive defense. Entrapment is a, yes, I did it, but here's why. And so if you argue entrapment, then you are guilty, but you have a lawful excuse. You were forced to do it. So on the charges that were stayed, he can't argue entrapment because he was never convicted of those, and they were never tried. So last I checked, he is still currently appealing these convictions because obviously they're not going to.
It was last year.
Yeah, they're not going to let him use the entrapment defense on the things he was convicted of because they'd already stayed the ones that are potentially entrapment. But yeah, he's currently appealing. Again, don't think he should be a cop. Don't think he's a great person. But I do think that York Regional Police manufactured a corrupt cop here where, like, yeah, he was corrupt, but he was low-level corruption, and they turned this into something bigger.
Yeah, I will say that, like, I think throughout this entire episode, I've sounded very, like, sympathetic towards him, which is absolutely not my intention. He's, at the end of the day, he still isn't good at his job, bare minimum. Well, and at maximum, it took 5 months to get him to that point.
I am kind of sympathetic towards him because if they had done the right thing and fired him, even charged him with breach of trust on the initial issues of looking up things in a police database, he could potentially just, like, be a free man and have a career doing something else where he's not in a public trust position and potentially just have a normal life. Like,
that's true.
You know, I don't think there's any risk to the public, really, until they started manufacturing, because he pushed back on this corruption stuff until he crossed a line and started, like, presumably pocketing the money is when he started crossing a line of corruption in his own mind. And that's when everything went downhill from there. So
that is fair and I think reasonable to be like, he didn't, because, like, again, as we discussed earlier, his career at that point was, like, a complete lie. So, like, that's already pretty emotionally devastating. He was put into a situation that, like, he wouldn't, I don't think, on his own have been put into. And, like, because of what the undercover cops were, like, encouraging him to do, he ended up doing things that I don't think he would have done on his own.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the raiding the warehouse thing, I don't think that would have even entered his mind until a few months of this. Yeah. And obviously a person who is susceptible enough to, like, be pushed into this position shouldn't be a cop. You're under too many stresses to do things that you maybe shouldn't. But I don't think that had he not been pushed, he would have been a danger to society at all. Because, I mean, if you look, there were no victims here, really, other than him.
Except for, like, except for the potential stalk.
Well, I mean, victims of of what he was doing in the investigation.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So, like, he obviously can't be trusted to have police database access or access to weapons and stuff like that. But I don't think he, like, without his police authority, was any threat to society. Because if he had been fired right at the beginning of this, before any of this pressure was put on him, I don't see this turning into a violent guy raiding drug houses. Like, I see this turning into a sad man who goes and gets a job in construction or something. Like,
Yeah,
which is probably a better outcome for
what I
everyone.
see.
Yeah.
Kind of what I.
So, yeah, more Mr. Big. Like, this is kind of Mr. Big because, yeah, it wasn't the same way, but Wong did portray himself as being fairly high up in this drug trade thing and offered a unique opportunity to Senior that he wouldn't have had otherwise.
This is definitely very nuanced, I would say. Sorry.
I will also note that this might not be a problem with Senior himself, but it is a problem with police culture in general. Is a lot of the sketchy activity should have been reported up to chain of command earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's this whole thing of not rolling over on your friends, and UC1 became his friend pretty quick, so he was inclined to ignore some of the sketchy stuff that was going on.
No, even if they're your friends, you report sketchy behavior.
Yeah, here's the thing I say to all new people in the industry is protecting your friends doesn't mean not calling them on their bullshit. Protecting your friends means calling them on their bullshit before it turns into an issue you have to report.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you see someone doing something problematic, if you're really their friend, you should call them out on it so that they can grow as a person and understand that what they're doing is bad.
Yeah, and a whole point of having a partner in these kind of jobs is to stop each other from making mistakes. So everyone makes mistakes, everyone gets emotional, everyone gets heated, everyone has a slip of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Your job as a partner, a second officer, is to recognize when that's about to happen and stop it. Not just for the benefit of the public who you're interacting with, but also for the benefit of your partner who you've just saved from making a mistake.
Yeah.
So that was the time that a Mr. Big sting was used on a cop.
Honestly, given how short of a time frame it was, I wonder if he maybe no. I don't think he's smart enough to have realized what was going on, because obviously.
I don't think he was a good person, and he really shouldn't have been a cop, but still, this is a bit much.
Yeah, this was a bit much, so just if you're in a position like this and you have access to information that most of the public doesn't have access to, maybe don't abuse that shit.
And if your partner's being sketchy, call them on it, please.
And if you listening have a case that you want us to cover, we have an email that you can send your case to. So it's letsdoacrime@gmail.com. That's letsdoacrime@gmail.com. And as long as it isn't related to murder, we might cover it someday.
And if it is related to murder, we might do some special episodes on stuff like that, but we're more interested in weird, interesting crime and legal concepts.
Because people are fucking stupid, yo. They do dumb shit all the time.
Sometimes entire agencies do dumb shit.
And it's more interesting to talk about that dumb shit.
Okay, bye.
Bye.